So in today's video, I want to talk about my 10 favorite integrated amps that I've ever heard in life. 2025 edition. We're in the middle of 2025. I've heard a lot of integrated amps over the last year or two. So I've updated my list from the video I posted several years ago. So get ready. This is going to be my top 10 favorite integrated amps of all time. Let's go right into number 10, the Yamaha AS3200. This is a beautiful integrated amp in looks, in design. It's stunning. It's a bit old school, a bit retro, but the insides are all modern. Now, this is a Class AB amp. I believe it puts out 100 watts per channel into 8 ohms. Now, this amp is lovely to look at. You have the 2 VU meters in the front. It comes in black or silver. All of the knobs, all of the buttons, all of the dials feel solid and silky. They click into place with authority. There's nothing wrong at all here with the build quality of the Yamaha. Now, the sound of the AS3200 is full-bodied, a little bit soft in the treble, kind of a little bit silky. This is a kind of an inviting amp. It has a lot of bass energy, a lot of bass power, and it just provides a beautiful listen. It does all of the audiophile tricks that you're looking for, has a nice solid sound stage. The imaging is very nice. It's more organic. It's not cut out and precise. This is not a bright amp. It's not a dry amp. This is what I would call a juicy amp. It's a little bit plump. It's very inviting. This is a beautiful integrated amp, and while it's the most expensive in the Yamaha lineup, you can get great deals on this amplifier. I like to check, or when I was in the market for one, I would check Amazon Prime, and it seemed like every day there was a new price on it. And then there was one day it was several $1,000s off. So you can find deals on the Yamaha AS3200. If you like the retro looks, the retro VU meters, it comes in silver and black. I think it looks stunning in silver. I think it's a masterpiece in silver. The AS3200 from Yamaha is my number 10 favorite integrated amp of all time. So number 9, I thought about this list and I placed them in where I would put them today. Number 9, this used to be a favorite of mine. I don't think it's made anymore, but it's still, I consider it a classic. It was something so unique when it came out. The Line Magnetic 219IA, which stands for integrated amp. This was an all-tube amp. It used 845 tubes, 300B tubes. You had your driver tubes. It looked industrial. It was heavy as all get out, over 100 pounds. And it had that single-ended triode sound, right? It was immediate. It was electric. It had vocals that were very cleanly detailed, yet 3D and holographic. There was a softness or a warmness about this amp as well. It provided plump mid-bass and plump bass. It was more of a romantic listen when I had it paired up to the Klipsch Heresy 4s, or the Heresy 3s at the time, I should say. And those speakers are not known to be romantic or warm at all. But this amp really made those Heresy 3s sing. I remember listening to it, and a friend of mine came over and he declared it the best system he ever heard, that Line Magnetic 219IA with those Klipsch Heresies. Now, the Line Magnetic is made in China, but Line Magnetic makes some really, truly fantastic, beautiful tube gear. They even have a 300B amp that's pretty nice. But the Line Magnetic 219IA is still one of my favorite integrators of all time, makes number 9 on the list. So moving into number 8, I remember this amp very, very well. There are certain amps that I hear, even my wife hears, they kind of stick with us, right? It sticks to our heart. And this was one of those amps. This was the amp in play when my wife first cried to listening to a song. And this is the Enlium Amp 23R. Now, this is a little tiny amp. It's kind of a minimalistic amp, but holy wow, the sound quality is out of this world on this amp. I think I said it was lit from within. Others have said that too. It has this illuminated glow that it The sound signature is just detailed, open, one of the widest sound stages I've ever heard, and it's a uniquely designed amplifier. Very minimalistic. It does have a remote control, and very, very small and kind of lightweight. But even so, the sound quality of the Enlium Amp 23R is stunning. I think a sponsor of mine, the Music Room, has one for sale used right now in their used department. And if I had unlimited money, I would buy one just to keep it here and listen to it from time to time. I remember reviewing that amp and just listening to it hours on end and just marveling at the way it did detail. It was very holographic, very open. Very, very cool amp, the Enlium Amp 23R. So number 7 is an amp that I was able to hear in here not so long ago, but I didn't review it because I didn't have it long enough. It was actually a viewer who sent me his amp, so kind to do, so I can hear it and check it out. This is when I was digging into Niagara, and I'm talking about the Niagara Classic Int, the Classic Integrated. This is a beautiful integrated amp. It looks like the Niagara Classic amp, but it has more controls on the front. It's basically that classic amp, but in integrated form. Now this amp is over $20,000 today. I remember when it first came out, I could have swore it was around the $10,000 mark. But today it's something between $20,000 and $23,000. This is a beautiful piece of equipment, Niagara, made in Switzerland. It has that organic, natural sound to it. Niagara is probably the most natural sounding amplification that I've heard to date. Beautiful, beautiful sound. Again, it does the sound stage, it does the imaging. All of these amps I talk about does this stuff, the audiophile tricks. They all do it, but in their own unique ways. Now, the Niagara Classic Integrated was transparent, it was wide open, but it had a beautiful little bit of warmth and glow to the mid-range, which brought the voices to life. And there were times when I thought the artist was in the room here. So yeah, one day, if I ever get one of these in for a longer period, I would happily review the Niagara Classic Int. But it brought an experience that touched my heart and I never was able to forget. So the Niagara Classic Integrated is my number 7 favorite of all time, even though I had minimal time with it. But I've had a lot of time with Niagara gear. It's very special gear, very expensive, a little bit overpriced if you ask me. But the people that this is marketed to have the money to spare, have the money to burn, so it's not a big deal to them. But other than that, this is a beautiful integrated amp. So let's move on to number 6. And this one is kind of tied for me, so I'm putting both of them in here. They're both from Past Labs. Now, Past Labs, the Integrated 250, is an amazing integrated amp. It gets rave reviews from every online reviewer, every magazine reviewer, and just about everyone who owns one. The Integrated 250 is big, it's heavy, it's over 100 pounds. It's Class AB, the first few watts are in Class A, but it has a way of delivering that human touch to the sound, meaning I connected with the music when listening to the Past Labs Int 250 very easily. It has a little sparkle up top, and it has a little bit of energy in the mid-range that makes it sound a little brighter than, say, something like the Yamaha, but it's not bright in any way. It's just alive, it's energetic, it's dynamic, right? It has some impact as well. The bass is very tight, very well controlled on the Integrated 250. So this is a stunning amp with 250 watts per channel. It can pretty much drive anything. On the opposite side of the Past Labs spectrum is the Integrated 25. Now this has 25 watts of Class A power, pure Class A power, and it rates higher. I think it rates up into 80, 90 watts, but then it will turn to Class AB. But this amp is all about those first 25 watts into Class A, and it's such a beautiful sounding amp, a little more alive and sparkly even than the Integrated 250, and I felt the mid-range was a little bit bigger sounding with the Integrated 25. Now, being such a lower power amp versus the Int 250, you're going to want to pair the Int 25 with speakers that are not very hard to drive. When I had the integrated 25, I just marveled at how it made every speaker sound so good. Of course, with all of these integrated, it's going to depend on the DAC you choose, the turntable you choose, the cartridge, the phono stage, the streamer. But these amps that I'm talking about today are all fantastic and are all a candidate to be the heart of your system. I love past labs. I have for a long time. The integrated 250 and the integrated 25 are tied in my number 6 spot. These are amps I'll never forget. So let's just keep moving along to number 5. I don't want to drag this video out too long. Now, number 5, the amp in this position used to be my number 1. It was my number 1 for a while, but as we go long term, as we use things longer, opinions change. So my opinions change over time. But now this is in the number 5 slot. Also, I've heard a lot of amps after this one. So this is the Electro ECI 60X Mark II. Now this is the version, I had the version with the streamer and DAC built in, but I used it with an external streamer and DAC, and that's how I got the best sound from it. The thing I love about the Electro brand is the amps, right? Their amplifiers are beefy. They're dynamic. They have amazing punch and kick. Drums are amazing on the Electro Vocals are present and in the room, and the treble is not thin or lean or dry. The treble blends with the mid-range so well. It just creates such a perfect full-bodied sound from top to bottom, and that's the key word, full-bodied. I'm not a fan of lean-sounding amps, and when the Electro came in, I was amazed at how full-bodied it sounded compared to many other amps that I have heard. And it became addicting for a while, and over time, the sound would change depending on the streamer and DAC I used, but one thing remained is the solidity, the density of the sound. And that doesn't mean it was closed in or warm. It really wasn't. It was still open, dynamic, really good imaging, really big sound stage. It brought life to this room. And sometimes I would listen here at night with that amp and I would get goosebumps. It was haunting at times. So the Electro ECI 60X Mark II is an amazing integrated amp. It doesn't have the looks that some of you are after. It doesn't have the VU meters. It has a unique kind of style to it that has kind of been with Electro for as long as I can remember. But Electro is a beautiful, beautiful brand, and beautiful sound comes from their integrated amps. If I were to buy it today, I would buy the one without the streamer and DAC built in. You'll save some money, and you'll be able to get the best from it by using your own DAC and your own streamer. So the Electro comes in at number 5. We're going into the top 4 now. So number 4 is another fantastic integrated amp, and the music room, tmraudio.com, has one for sale used right now. The retail of this with the DAC and the phono stage was about 20 grand when it came out. I think the music room has one for 7,900 or something like that. Oh, if I had the money, again, another amp I would own just to have here. The Aavic U150 was an amp I really fell for because it had a sound that had a little bit of warmth. It didn't have, now it uses Class D amplification, but this was the first Class D I heard that didn't sound either overly smooth or overly bright or thin or lean. It was almost perfect. I remember listening to it with speakers that were bright, and it tamed them out a little bit. This is an amp that has an organic flow. It's a bit juicy, right? It's not fat or plump, but it has some warmth in the mid-range, and the bass was beautiful, big bass that still remained clean and tight. The treble was a little bit subdued versus, say, something like the Enlium Amp 23R, but it was just an overall beautiful package. The weakness with this amp for me was the crappy little Apple TV style remote. I wish that all companies would make a better remote for their integrated amps. But overall, the amp itself with the big dial in the middle, the big display of volume and all of that, the built-in DAC was fantastic, is fantastic. And the phono stage, is incredible in the Aavic U150. So yeah, I have a soft spot in my heart for some Aavic designs. I actually prefer the U150 to the line they came out with after. Like there was a U180. I like the U150 better because it wasn't analytical, it wasn't dry. Some of the newer Aavic integrated amps were a little more analytical, but yeah, I love that U150. I still love it to this day, and that's why it's my number 4 favorite integrated amp of all time. So let's move into the top 3. Now these amps are all amps I've heard over the last year and a half, or 2 years. They're more recent. So these are all incredible, incredible amplifiers. So number 3, the Luxman 509Z. Now this, when it came in, I was in awe at the beauty, the perfection of the build, the attention to detail. I am a sucker for VU meters when it's done right? There's a lot of cheap gear that uses VU meters. That's kind of cheesy, but when it's done right, it can be beautiful. And the Luxman 509Z does VU meters right, but everything else is done right, from the top plate that looks so beautiful to the overall build quality inside and out. Pure Luxman quality all the way. They're not finding parts from China and all over the world and stuffing them in. They make their own parts and they build their own amps, and that is why they're so remarkable. The 509Z, to me, sounded almost as perfect as you can get. It had beautiful treble, beautiful mid-range, beautiful bass. There was a drive and energy to it. It almost seemed effortless in the power, though I believe it's 120 watts into 8 ohms. You have your tone controls that are done in a way like no one else does them. They don't sound, when you turn up the treble, it's not going to add this brightness. Instead, it just adds a little bit more treble energy, but it still retains smooth. Same with the bass. There's even a mid-range dial in that section. The phono stage is excellent here, but no matter what speaker I hooked up the 509Z to, beautiful sound emerged. There was a little bit of warmth, and from what I was told, the Z has a little bit more warmth versus the X. Now, when I reviewed the 595 ASC Special Edition, I thought it was a little bright in the treble, but the 509Z is in no way bright in the treble. This is a really beautiful amp. If you're into the looks, if you're into the vibe of Luxman, this amp puts out the first few watts in Class A, but it's a powerhouse. It's a dynamo. It can power any speaker you hook up to it. It's a high current integrated amp. So if you have power-hungry speakers, chances are the 509Z will power them with ease. This could easily be my number 1 or 2 favorite amp, but it falls in number 3 because the next 2 are just that little bit better. So let's move on to number 2. So number 2 is an amp that when I reviewed it, it was the finest integrated amp I've ever experienced up until that time. The Luxman sits right behind it. It's hot on its heels, but the amp I'm talking about in number 2 is the T+A PA3100HV. When I reviewed this amp, I was so excited to get it in. I drove all far to go pick up the crate. It went into the back of my truck, brought it home, lugged it out. The thing was heavy as heck, put it on my cabinet, and I was just in awe of the build quality. Everything about it was just over the top insane. This is probably the finest build quality I have ever seen in an integrated amp. And just like Luxman, T+A build their own stuff. They build their own parts. They make everything to their specs. And this amp is called HV for high voltage because they run a higher voltage on the rails. And for me, this provided a unique sound. It didn't sound like any other integrated amp I've heard, but it was at the time the finest I heard. There was beautiful instrument separation, a wide sound stage, tall sound stage, deep sound stage. There was layering going on. It was just an overall amazing experience. The remote could be used as a weapon if someone breaks in your house. This thing was overbuilt to the extreme. but the sound quality matched. Everything about this amplifier, this integrated amplifier, is just insanely, insanely good. The mid-range had this beautiful quality to it. I say a little bit of smokiness, but I don't want to say that because people will think there's a smokiness to the voices or something, but it was just maybe 0.5% of this. And it added this magic tonality to the mid-range that was just beautiful. I think it has something to do with the higher voltage on the rails. But everything about this amplifier, this integrated amplifier, is top-notch. It was dead silent in the room all of the weeks that I had it here. Never did I hear a transformer hum or buzz at all with the T+A. And that's pretty incredible because sometimes amps come in with the big transformers and I'll hear a little hum from the amp or a little buzz. But the T+A was silent as a mouse, powerful as can be, and is one of the most powerful integrated amps I've ever heard. You hear other reviewers and myself talk about that effortless ease. That means you can just turn it up a little bit and you just feel the power coming out of your speakers. This integrated amp was refined, magical, and beautiful, depending on if you like that industrial kind of style. Now it comes in a silver lacquer and it comes in the titanium finish, which is what I reviewed. But overall, that T+A PA3100 HV, stunning, stunning amp. I think it's $24,000. It doesn't come with a phono stage. It doesn't come with a DAC. So those are things you'll have to add after the fact. So by the time you get a system built around this integrated amp, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. But this is a lifetime amp. Anyone who buys this amp, you're not going to want to ever get rid of it. That's why it's rare, very rare to see this amp on the used market. The T+A PA3100 HV is my number 2 favorite integrated amp of all time. Where does that leave us with number 1? So in the number 1 spot, I want to talk about an integrated amp that is unlike any integrated amp made today. There's nothing like this integrated amp on the market. There may be some that have features that are similar, but none are implemented like this, and none look like this, and none sound like this. The number 1, my number 1 favorite integrated amp of all time, and I have tons of listening hours on this unit. It is the Devlet Astra. Now, I just recently reviewed it. It was my last video. I've been listening to this for weeks. I've been listening to it in the middle of the night. I've been listening to it in the morning. I've been listening to it in the afternoon. My wife has joined me back here and has been listening to it. It is probably the closest to perfection I've ever seen in an integrated amp. And I mean heard, seen, felt, heard, experienced. I tested it against separates and it held its own or bested the separates. The remote control is the finest I've ever seen or experienced from any product, any electronics product in my lifetime. This is such a beautiful remote control. The amplifier, the one I have here, is the Opera de Paris version, covered in real 23 karat gold leaf by hand. The process takes like 2 weeks to do. They also have the light bronze version, which comes in at $5,000 less. But man, is this a powerhouse of an amplifier. Now this amp melds Class A and Class D together. Class A preamp, Class D power. 150 watts into 8 ohms, 300 watts into 4 ohms. It has the built-in DAC, the Magic Wire DAC. It has a phono stage that is easily the finest I've ever heard in my life. It makes my $600 U-turn Orbit sound like a $5,000 player. They have SAM, speaker active matching. It matches your speakers to the Astra for best sound. There's a database of 1,200 speakers in there. You go into the configurator in the new app or online, and I like to use the app because it's quick, easy, works in real time. There's no more SD cards to transfer settings, and you just pick your speaker. It will tune those speakers to the amp automatically. They also have RAM, record active matching, where you can pick the curve you want, and you can pick the cartridge you're using. You pick the cartridge from the list, it will automatically set up the phono stage for the best performance for your cartridge. Now, I did this with my $600 table with an Audiophile cartridge on it, and I could not believe the sound. I got out of vinyl after so many tries and I have a lot of records still from when I was younger and throughout life. And every time I tried to build a turntable system, I could never get it to sound as good as my digital. In fact, not even close. I came close once with a really high-end setup, but I spent a fortune on that setup. And, you know, I was like, am I going to buy new records that cost $50 to $100 a piece? You can go to used record stores and get them for a few bucks, but the real good quality albums are going to cost a lot of money. So I kind of faded out of vinyl for a while, but when I hooked up my U-Turn Orbit Special here, I was blown away at the sound quality just using a little Audiophile cartridge going into the Devlet Astra. It really made magic with that turntable and that low-end cartridge. The DAC here is stunning. Now, the sound stage is wide, deep, tall, has layers, but the Astra's claim to fame, its magic trick, is that it's dynamic, it's powerful, it's crystalline without being analytical. There's a little bit of warmth in the mid-range, and the bass is really big. No distortion, no coloration, no saturation. You're hearing the recordings exactly how you should be hearing the recordings. And you can stream anything to it. It has a built-in streamer that is remarkable. I tried hooking up the Niagara streamer to it. It wasn't really an improvement. So this all-in-one box of streamer, DAC, amplifier, phono stage, all in this sleek, beautiful package. It also saves a lot of money. This is another reason it's my favorite. You only need one power cord, one set of speaker cables, and that's it. And you have this high-end system in one box. This is truly a remarkable integrated amplifier. Back in 2014, I had the Devlet 200, not the Expert 200, just the 200. I really enjoyed that amplifier for a long while, but the Astra is leagues better, not only in execution, in features, in the streamer section is way better, but I believe Devlet somehow tuned this sound and created an even better sounding amplifier. The bummer about the Astra for most people and for me is that it costs a lot of money. The light bronze is 20 grand. The gold leaf version is 25 grand. But you know what? I tested it against separates that would cost 25 grand and it bested them. I tested it comparing it to, say, the T+A PA3100 HV, which has its own unique charms. Some people may prefer that, but you got to add a streamer, you got to add a DAC, you got to add a phono stage. It's going to cost you 40 grand by the time you add all this stuff, and that 3100 HV will not clean the Astra's clock. The Astra will hang right with it, but in its own way. The Astra also has some of the most incredible instrument separation that I've heard in any system. Now, this amp also pairs extremely well with my reference Icon 12 speakers. These are my favorite speakers of all time, and I've been trying so many different amps with them and DACs. So bottom line is the Icon 12 sound better with the Devlet Astra than I've heard them with any other amplification, period. And somebody's going to say, well, what about this? What about that? No, the Astra sounds better with the Icon 12s than any amplifier I've tried with them to date, whether that's separates or integrated. It sounds beautiful with the speakers I have behind me, the Pure Audio Project Duet 15 horns. It sounds beautiful with the Bucard E50s that I also have here. And the fact that you can match it to your speakers, if your speakers are in that list, 1,200 speakers in that list, is incredible. The fact that you can match your turntable cartridge and have it do all its magic internally and tune it is incredible. The fact that I can change any of the outputs or inputs in the back to anything I want is incredible. This is the future. This is the future to me. It has everything you could want and nothing that you do not. And you're not having to hook up things with interconnects and cables. And, that's a whole other story for another day. It just works. So the Devlet Astra, without question, it's not even close when I consider everything that this does and everything that it offers, is my favorite integrated amp of all time that I've ever experienced, heard, or used. So there you go. I love you all, and I will see you in the next one.